Story 1. I'm an ESL teacher in Taiwan. I designed a lesson for an advanced class on idioms. I had just finished explaining the phrase, like pulling teeth, when a student said, "Teacher, look." She proudly held up a tooth, one of her baby teeth that she had pulled out while I was explaining the idiom. Story 2. I used to work in early childhood special education. I taught a class of around 10 pre-kindergarten students with various developmental delays, including autism spectrum disorder and others. One day it was nap time and one student really disliked naps. He would usually fall asleep after about 10 minutes, but during the first 10 minutes of lying down he would try to get up, talk to teachers, or reach for toys until he fell asleep on his little bed. This particular day he was not having it. When I told him it was nap time and asked if I could walk him to his bed, he did not refuse. He did not cry or run to the toys. Instead, he looked me square in the eye and deliberately wet his pants. He knew that would delay nap time while we helped him change and get cleaned up. Fortunately, he never did that again, but I will never forget a 4-year-old outsmarting me by wetting his pants right in front of me. Story 3. Explaining that a Roman emperor had centurions kill his mother, a student stood up and asked, "You expect me to believe that a half-man, half-horse killed this guy's mom?" Story 4. Someone actually brought a goat to class for show and tell. It escaped. Chaos followed. Story 5. While looking at population graphs with Year 9 students, a student meant to say there are more elderly people today than 50 years ago but said that the elderly reproduced much more. I laughed and the class took a little while to get the joke. Story 6. One time I left a Martin Luther King handout for a 7th grade English class. It was a basic assignment. Read the passage and answer the questions. My substitute teacher took it upon himself to divide the class by race. He made the black, white, and Mexican students sit with their own race to show them what it was like. I have to give him credit for trying to engage them. I got a call in the middle of the day and had to explain to the principal that it was not in the lesson plans. That substitute teacher was never invited back. Story 7. I am not a teacher. For 8 years I was a parent volunteer in the library. A first grader asked me to help her find a book. That was completely normal. I asked questions to figure out which book she meant so I could find it. She did not know the title, the plot, the cover color, or anything else, only that she had really enjoyed the book in a dream the previous night. I was unable to find that specific, probably imaginary, book, but I did find something she was willing to check out and read instead. Story 8. In 7th grade, a rather literal-thinking boy became frustrated trying to decide whether the Nazis were good or bad. It was understandable for his age. He had heard family members speak negatively about the communists in the Soviet Union, and he could not understand why the Allies, Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom, would fight groups that had opposed the Nazis. The boy wanted a simple world of good guys and bad guys. He was deeply confused by the rapid transition from World War II, fought against Germany, into the Cold War against the Soviet Union. Imagine a stressed boy saying, "But then the Nazis are good. They have to be good." Story 9. I recently posted this in the teacher's subreddit. I was reading and grading 11th grade essays on Lord of the Flies. One was too well written. A student copied commentary from the New York Times book review. At least he was stealing from the best. I confronted the student and gave him a chance to rewrite because I am too generous. The student said to me, "You were not supposed to read that. I was not supposed to read the words you wrote in your essay. It is not even Thanksgiving yet. This is going to be a long year." Story 10. My first year of teaching, I had some interesting children. One such child, whom I will call Aaron, liked to spend his recess looking for critters. He had to be watched because that year he had shoved small frogs into his pockets, tried to help ants, lost a caterpillar somewhere in the classroom, and befriended countless other creatures. If it was there, he'd find it. One day, 2 of my little 4th graders walked up to me near the end of recess and one said, "Aaron's got a squirrel's head." I jumped up. "Aaron's got a what?" "Well, he doesn't have a squirrel's head. He found a squirrel's head," the second child said. "Where is he?" I asked, but I did not need to find him as I only had to spot the growing group of 3rd and 4th grade boys huddled in a circle, one eager boy making his way over with a long stick. The other teachers and I rushed in that direction. As I passed a third-grade boy, he looked at me with the biggest smile and said, "I always wanted to see brains." "Well, today's your lucky day, I guess," I said. The boy's face dropped. "No, but maybe next time." Aaron had, in fact, found a squirrel's head. What followed was chaotic and strangely funny. The boys thought it was the greatest day of their lives and wanted to investigate. The girls were nearly in tears over the loss of the squirrel's life and asked for a moment of silence. To say the least, it trumped the day a student brought a dead bat to school for show and tell. Story 11. This is not my story. I know a teacher who, on the first day of teaching middle school, had a student walk up to the single box fan in the window because the school had no air conditioning and fart into it. The student assumed no one could call home because his parents did not speak English. Little did he know the parents spoke the teacher's native language, and the teacher called them without breaking eye contact and told them what he had done. Story 12. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes minors. Sanitized version. Former middle school teacher here. I had two sixth-grade students whom I caught engaging in inappropriate behavior under their desks. I worked in a very conservative, small-town school district, so it became a significant issue. One student's mother was my mentor, which made future meetings very awkward. Story 13. I am not a teacher, but this probably fits the bill. It was in 11th grade biology, I think, and the teacher was demonstrating a device used to measure lung capacity. He asked for volunteers, so I joined in. He instructed us to first breathe into it at our normal rate, note the level, then push hard to expel all air from our lungs and compare. So I went up in front of the class, breathed into it, and then as I blew harder, I accidentally farted. The class erupted in laughter. The teacher himself left the room, nearly in tears, to avoid laughing in front of the class. Thanks for the memory, Mr. Seguin. Story 14. I am not a teacher, but this is a story I absolutely love. When I was 10, in year 6 for people in the United Kingdom, my junior school started giving maths homework to help us prepare for secondary school. One day, our maths teacher asked for our homework books. One girl nervously went to his desk and whispered something to him. He immediately started laughing hysterically, crying with laughter. After he managed to calm down, he asked the girl to repeat to the class what she had told him. She sheepishly said, "My dog ate my homework." She then pulled her homework book out of a carrier bag. It was mauled. Apparently the night before their dog, which I think was a Great Dane, had decided her homework was his new toy. Obviously my dog ate my homework is an old joke. But he had never imagined a student would actually need to tell him that. Story 15. Taekwondo instructor. I use an anecdote about defending myself from a mugger as a way to explain the ins and outs of self-defense. This somehow evolved into a rumor that I murdered a man and got away with it. Learning that your students respect you more through very unsubtle whispers because you supposedly committed literal murder really is something. Story 16. When I was in high school, I was required to take Spanish. The instruction was poor, and the school hired an instructor who had dementia. For the entire school year, we covered the same lesson and did the same project, so we gained nothing from the class. Story 17. The bucket oh fuck. I was an instructor for advanced individual training in the United States Army in the late 2000s until about 2012. I do not remember the exact year, but I worked what we called mid-shift, from 11 in the evening to 6 in the morning. I was teaching a class when one of my students was caught by the shift lead drawing an anatomically correct bucket oh fuck, a pail with a handle and a bunch of penises coming out of the top, ejaculating, complete with veins and semen splashing everywhere. It was titled Bucket Oh Fuck. Students were not allowed to be drawing at the time. They were supposed to be learning, and she was apparently learning something we were not teaching. Story 18. One day I took my class to the computer lab and several keyboards had keys ripped off. These were brand new computers. When I asked around, I learned that one of the fourth graders had found a baby opossum on the playground and put it in his or her pocket. The teacher found the opossum while the class was in the computer lab and made the student give it up. The kids were so angry that they could not keep their pet that they tore off a bunch of keys. The principal announced that she was going to have the district dock everyone's pay to cover the replacement keyboards, about $37 per person, because the teacher should have been supervising the class better. Story 19. When I was a substitute teacher, I was assigned to an English as a second language class in a junior high. Almost all of the students were Hispanic. Apparently, they thought I was stupid. I had the attendance roster for the first period class in my hand when the bell rang. There were a lot of kids socializing before school. I said to the class, "If your name is not on my roster, you need to go to your own class." One student near me looked at the roster and found the name of a friend of his. He said that was his name. I told him that if it was, he should sit down. Before he did so, he went to the door and shouted into the hallway in Spanish, "Oye, Lucho, no tienes que venir a clase hoy. Seré tú." He meant, "Hey, Luis, you don't have to come to class today. I'm going to be you." They obviously did not think that this very white man might be fluent in Spanish. So I said to this young man in Spanish, "If you have to tell Luis that you're going to be him, you're not him. Go tell Luis to come in here and go to your own class." The class was dead silent for a few moments. Then someone at the back of the class said, "El gringo entendió," meaning, the gringo understood. Story 20. One of my students picked up a turtle at the bus stop and forgot he had it until he got to school. Another student tried to eat a rhinoceros beetle because he was dared to do it, and it was recorded on video. Several students deliberately stapled themselves. Story 21. Last week, a 5-year-old threw a massive tantrum because I said no to playing with a specific toy that morning. The children were fighting over it. During the tantrum, he split his lip and then spat blood and saliva at his friends when they tried to ask if he was okay. Story 22. Not a teacher, but I saw this when I was a freshman in high school. After someone tried to put a dry ice bomb in a cafeteria trash bin, half the students in my class were discussing how to create effective chaos for eardrums while being mindful of people with sensory issues. I said I was just impressed they managed to obtain the dry ice in the first place and then sneak it into a school. As someone with sensory issues, I pointed out they were at least smart enough not to mix drain cleaner and milk of magnesia, which could cause serious harm. There is a reason construction workers use earmuffs. The teacher looked nervous that a couple of kids from the neighborhood knew how to make a supposedly non-lethal bomb. This was not even a science class, and it did not help that it was shortly after the attacks on September 11, 2001, when we had several bomb scares. Looking back, it made me wonder why many of us were not allowed to take chemistry and were placed in less advanced science courses. Story 23. When I was in 10th grade, several of my classmates brought ingredients and a waffle maker to class and made waffles. The teacher did not even notice. Story 24. When I was an intern teaching assistant, I had to stay after classes with some problem students, mostly to keep them out of their respective blocks and give them supplementary lessons. One of the students had serious anger issues and targeted another classmate during our lessons. It got so bad that he lifted a chair to hit the student with it. I was quick enough to shield the other student and suffered bruising on my shoulder. I also learned that the angry student's homeroom teacher was extremely abusive. This was in the Philippines, so there are many practices that would not fly by Western standards, but apparently she threatened students with a steel pipe. She confronted me after I reported her students' behavior. She changed her tune when I brought professional cameras to work and set them up in the classrooms, saying I intended to make a documentary and submit it to a local news station. Not a complete lie, since I had to do a video project during my time as a teacher for my postgraduate requirements. Suddenly, she was conciliatory, and the steel pipe mysteriously vanished. Story 25. I was substituting at a middle school when a student who had been suspended, which I did not know, showed up for class, completed part of a worksheet I had assigned, and became excessively noisy. He ran around the room, knocking over desks when I told him to stop, and later ran through the school on a brief rampage before leaving. Another student asked to use the restroom, snuck into the art class, grabbed spray paint, and sprayed a homophobic slur on another student's locker. This was a very rural school, and according to other teachers, his family were essentially white supremacists. Story 26. A couple of decades ago, I taught middle school. One of my students was in 7th grade, so about 12 years old. He would always ask if we could watch war movies. He rattled off all the films his parents allegedly let him watch, including some R-rated violent and gory movies. One day he asked if we could watch The General's Daughter, a strongly R-rated movie with very graphic sexual assault scenes. My teaching assistant and I froze, looked at him, and asked if he had actually seen the film. He said very nonchalantly that his parents had let him watch it. It was shocking. Story 27. This is not my story, but it happened at my school before I worked there. A male student with severe behavioral problems was in a class taught by a petite, inexperienced female teacher. His behavior was antagonistic for quite some time. One day he dropped his shorts, exposed his genitals to the whole class and the teacher, and defecated in the garbage bin. He was arrested and expelled. Story 28. A fifth-grade student brought a coral snake in a disposable plastic container to show the class. When I said he couldn't bring the snake to school, he asked, "Is this like the salmonella risk with turtles?" I replied, "No, this is about the venomous bite." Story 29. I am not a teacher, just a private tutor for various middle school and high school subjects. The student is 18 but still a high school junior. He failed Algebra 2 in his sophomore year and is retaking the course online this year. I asked him to solve 2x plus 3 is equal to 7. He took longer than I expected and wrote 2x equals 10. The student has no disabilities. We are from a country where parents typically helicopter their children, especially in education. He attends an international school with an American curriculum, and the annual tuition is higher than the local median annual salary. The student, already an adult, deliberately refuses to retain knowledge learned in class. Story 30. Not a teacher, but I remember in 7th grade reading class, the teacher asked one student for his homework. He stood up, walked over to her, and said, "Here is your homework." He then punched her in the face and sprinted out of the room. Story 31. I am not a teacher, but there was a girl in my grade who would flip desks, scream, and run out of the room when she was told no. I had to deal with her for 4 years. I am good friends with her older brother, and he unfortunately told me that she refuses to change. She needs a wake-up call soon. Story 32. I am not a teacher, but this is a story my debate coach told me. He also taught oral communications, and one of our first assignments was a shoebox speech. One memorable occasion involved a student who asked to bring her pet, Fluffy, to school. You can guess what happened. Fluffy was not Fluffy. Fluffy was an 8-foot boa constrictor that terrified most of the class. Story 33. It must be Kevin. This is old Reddit lore. Cannot link it, but I am sure someone will. Story 34. I am not a teacher, but as a child, in 5th grade my class once made our teacher cry by continuing to fool around instead of settling down. I egged the class on by screaming that they couldn't get all of us in trouble. Her boyfriend, another teacher at our school, came into the classroom and yelled at us until we calmed down. Story 35. I will share the most memorable story from when my mother taught high school. She was reviewing material for the state exam when she noticed one of her usually fidgety students had been asleep the whole time. She walked over to his desk, woke him, and asked if he was okay. He groggily said he was fine, adjusted in his chair to get comfortable, and began to fall back asleep. She later said she heard a sizzle, but did not think much of it, and continued walking around the room to help other students. A minute later students shouted, "Miss, there is smoke coming out of his shoes. His pants are on fire." He had brought a wad of Easy Strike matches to school, and when he shifted around while half asleep, the friction in his pants pocket ignited them. He suffered third-degree burns on his inner thigh and carried the story with him for the rest of his life. I miss you, Brian. Story 36. I am an elementary school teacher, and one student could not figure out how to use the whiteboard. Story 37. I am not a teacher. I am here to read wackadoodle responses. Story 38. A student turned in an essay about their summer vacation that was entirely about someone else's trip to Japan, with a different name at the top. The student really thought copying and pasting would work. Story 39. I am not a teacher, but my partner was, and he tells this story often. On a 10th grade overnight trip to see several Shakespeare plays at a theater festival, Two boys got off the bus after a 3-hour ride looking woozy and acting strangely. Turned out they had taken lysergic acid diethylamide they bought online before the plays. They spent the night in the hospital and their parents had to pick them up. They were physically fine but were suspended for a week, and their parents were mortified. Story 40. I have been a teacher here for more than 10 years and have a bunch of stories. One is about a student with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder who was around 12 and could not sit still. He always had something in his hands and kept shaking. One day he was handling something and, oblivious, continued until the whole class realized he was masturbating. He then stood up and continued, to the amusement of the other students and general laughter. My usual response when he was difficult to manage was to tell him to do a few laps around the court and come back when he felt ready to be still. Another involved older students, 16 and 17, in a special education class. I remember one student telling the whole group that he did not want his parents to find the condoms he was using, so he threw them out the window. The neighbor's roof was covered with colorful wrappers from the products he had been purchasing. I have many more stories, but I am on the phone and about to fall asleep. Story 41. We did trust falls off a ladder. The first kid went, and the other kids did not catch him. I was not a teacher. That kid was me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.